to present, but I'm going to cover for her. And I've been with the University of New Mexico for 23 years, most of that time doing research development and proposal development with faculty. And I really actually enjoy the budgeting side of things and feel like I've got a lot of expertise on the budgeting side. And I'm currently the Associate Director of the Faculty Research Development Office, along with our director, Hannah Torres is here today joining us, and she'll be helping to keep an eye on the chat. Sean, I have Sean's bio here. He is the Senior Sponsored Projects Officer. He obtained his BS in Biology and Psychology from the University of New Mexico. He started his professional career as a research scientist for UNM main campus in 2010. In 2014, he began working for the MIND Research Network as a research coordinator. In 2016, he began working for the UNM HSE Sponsored Projects Office, and he's currently a grants specialist, CLIC ERA programmer. He's a trainer and a backup for all specialists in the UNM HSE Sponsored Projects Office. Thanks for co-presenting with me today, Sean.
Thank you for the intro.
Sure. So I will go over for the first half of the presentation. I'll be covering the main campus OSP budget templates that we use, giving some basic information for building budgets, things like that, tips that you should know, websites that are handy. And then the second half of the presentation will be Sean going over the HSE IBW. So I'll go ahead and just jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen? Okay, and I'll make these bigger. Yeah, sorry, I can't see if anyone's.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, awesome. So before we get started, I just want to mention some important websites for everybody these are websites I use typically when I'm creating proposal budgets. And the first is going to be, I'm trying to pull this over. Can you see the new screen I pulled over?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So the first one is the Office of Sponsored Projects website. This has lots of important information for when you're building proposals. The main thing I want to show you is the forms page, where you can find the budget multi-PI template and the budget, just the regular single PI template. Those are what I'm going to be going over today. There's also important resources on FNA rates and fringe benefits, which you can find here. The other important website is the tuition and fees rates, which is on the Bursar's website. And you'll notice there's the most current ones are at the top, and I'm using the 2023 grad main campus. Notice you can also find the grad HSC information here. And then the other thing is, you may know that graduate students have recently unionized, and so there are very specific guidelines as to minimums that graduate students can be paid. So this page is also very important when you're building a budget that includes graduate students. Notice there's the teaching assistants, the graduate assistants, and research assistants on this page as well as PAs. So refer to that when you're figuring out how much you're going to pay grad students on a project. All right, the first template I want to show is, this is the single PI template. And the way you know that is you've got just the one PI, and then there's a handy little base salary and FTE calculator and an ABS. So those are the tabs at the bottom of this one. We're going to start at the top. So there's a place to enter the agency name, the PI org code. There's a link to request a PI org code if your PI needs one. You can list the submitting unit, the project title, and this is an important area I wanted to cover. So let's say you're submitting a proposal that has a reduced F&A rate, and let's say the sponsor allows only 20% overhead, for example. There's a drop down here that you can say yes, that it's a reduced F&A rate. And what that does is it manipulates the formula at the bottom of the template down here for figuring out indirect costs. Because when you, sorry, getting to the bottom here. So here it manipulates this formula here. And when you are using a reduced F&A rate, you would charge overhead on total direct costs, not modified total direct costs. In most cases, there are exceptions. If you're submitting to a sponsor who says that it is that the reduced rate applies to MTDC, then you would not want to click this because it would your calculation would not be happening on MTDC if you had a yes marked here. So when you're starting your proposal, your budget, it's important to know the project period start date and end date, of course, but the start date is important for figuring out which fiscal year to begin your proposal budget in. So if you have a start date that falls the majority of the period of performance, for instance, in the first year, say it falls into FY25, you want to start your budget using FY25. So even though we know FY25 does not start until 7/1/2025 and runs through 6/30/2026, we want to make sure that the majority of the budget, if it falls into FY25, is where you begin. And the reason for that is because you have your fringe benefits, for example, which we know increase every year, and we want to make sure that we have enough fringe benefits to cover the budgeted personnel. So that's one thing to note. We've got the summer research. This, just to let you know, is calculated on a 9-month base salary, and only those who are on a 9-month contract can receive summer salary. For release time, that is calculated on also the 9-month base, but this is what's different about this is that whoever you put into the release time category, their fringes are being charged at the higher academic year rate rather than the summer rate.
Monica, do you mind if I jump in with a question before we move on
absolutely.
from the
Please
chat?
do. Please do.
So going back to the beginning part where you're answering yes or no for whether there's a reduced F&A rate, Anissa asked, why would you have a reduced F&A rate?
Oh, okay. So there are some programs where the solicitation specifically says that whoever applies, applicants are not allowed to charge their full F&A rate. Instead, it will say IDC F&A is capped at 20%, for example. And for whatever reason, the sponsor has mandated that. And so in that case, we would not charge our federally negotiated rate. That's the main reason why that would happen. All right. So continuing on, research faculty, these calculations are based on a 12-month contract. So keep that in mind. If someone is a research faculty or somebody on a 12-month contract, you would list them here. Staff, again, calculated on a 12-month contract, as are postdocs. Graduate students, this is where you would enter their rate per month based on the at least the minimums, like I showed in the for the graduate assistants. What am I trying to say? For their salaries, the minimum salaries on that website I showed earlier. Undergraduate students are entered at a rate per hour because they're typically on a hourly sort of salary. You calculate them on as hourly rates rather than monthly rates typically. Sometimes there are high school students on a project. It's kind of rare, but we have that section here just in case. A lot of times they'll be doing like summer work if they're in some kind of a summer program. We have all the fringe benefits built in, and we currently have our spreadsheet that goes out beyond 5 years in case you need it. We have the rates for the graduate research assistants here, and you'll enter if you've got, let's say you've got one graduate student on the project for the entire year, essentially, you would need to put in one entry for the fall and one entry for the spring and summer, and that covers the entire year of a graduate student for their health insurance. And if you have multiple graduate students on the project, like let's say you have 2, you want to increase that to 2. Then we've got the tuition and fees here, and it escalates 6% per year essentially in the out years. So we've got the starting rate in the first year. And then there's an area to add tuition differential fees and other fees as well. So that's why I pointed out the Bursar's website. That's important to figure out what the tuition differential fees are for the various colleges. Like for instance, I know School of Engineering has those fees, as does ANS, as do several other colleges. So you want to make sure that you have enough tuition budgeted for your students. And then we've got the mandatory fees here as well. And so this is for number of semesters. That's how you enter that part. And then capital equipment, which is excluded from, it's from the modified, that when you're using modified total direct costs, equipment is excluded. And overhead is charged only on the first 25K of the subawards, which you would enter here, the subaward amounts. Participant costs are also excluded from overhead, and those are exclusively for people who are not employees. They have to be people who are participating in a workshop or training program, something like that. Those costs can go under participant support costs, but employees cannot. And you've got travel, materials and supplies. An important aspect of this template is that we've got it set up so the subaward, the overhead on the subawards is automatically calculated here for you. So up to 5 subawards we have set up in this spreadsheet, so it calculates overhead on those. If you have more than 5 subawards, you will have to add extra lines, and you will up here, and you will have to manipulate the calculations here by adding another line. So right now this accommodates 5. A helpful tool on this spreadsheet is the base salary calculator. So let's say you have, a base salary of $100,000, but let's say that's only their part-time effort. Let's say they're at 50% FTE. This gives you their full-time base. It gives you, if they're on a 12-month contract, it lets you know what that rate would be per month, and then how to figure out the 1% effort, because main campus requires that, and I believe HSC does too, requires that all PIs and co-PIs have a minimum of 1% effort on each project.
HSC requires it as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Sean. Okay, and then we've also built in an ABS for this single PI template. So that way, once the project gets funded, as long as the as the amount funded hasn't changed from your original budget, this ABS will be applicable. And also, as long as you have not added any other categories or changed any of the categories under the various sections, like under the other direct costs section, because then it won't translate onto the ABS exactly. But it's meant to be a helpful tool in case you're kind of using the standard categories. You can also change them if you want to. This template is not locked at all.
Can you point out the calculator again? Rayanne was asking about the calculator.
Yeah, here. So it's on this second tab. Were there any specific questions about the calculator or?
Just where it was.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions, Rayanne? Nope, that's it. Thank you, Monica.
Okay. And I don't want to take up too much time because Sean needs his time to do his. So I'm just gonna wrap it up pretty quickly by showing you the multi-PI template. You'll notice this has all these tabs at the bottom. There's room for basically 10 co-PIs, if you will, or one lead PI and nine co-PIs. And then there's the summary tab on this one, which basically pulls in all the information from those other tabs into the summary. Because the sponsor only cares about the summary, these other tabs are just for internal UNM budgeting purposes, basically. And the time when you would use the multi-PI template is this facilitates the split for, like, let's say you're collaborating, you have a School of Engineering faculty leading this project, but they're collaborating with faculty from Arts and Sciences, for example. Both colleges want to make sure that they get their credit for the FNA that's being generated. And the way to do that is to use this template to set up your separate budgets. So you could have the lead PI is going to be the School of Engineering budget, for example. PI2 could actually be the ANS for the ANS PI. And so then when this gets awarded, it's very easy. You already have the budget broken down by college, and it's very easy to then set up the ABS per college, and they would each get a separate index. I think it is a separate index under the same fund, basically. So you have the overall grant, but each PI would get their own index for spending on the grant. Let's see. I don't know. Are there any questions at this point before I kind of wrap up and hand off to Sean? No? Okay. I'm going to stop sharing. And it's all yours, Sean. Go ahead.
Okay, let's see. So first off, I'm going to start off on our website, just to kind of give you an idea of where to find our tool, RIBW, and it would be actually you'd go to our website, which is hsc.unm.edu/about/finance/sponsored-projects. You'd actually go to our forms and documents, and you'd find our internal budget worksheet. We have a lot of useful things in here. So we have the internal budget worksheet, and this is actually where you download it. You'd click download, or you click this and it would automatically download via your browser. And then what you would get when you clicked on it is it would open up into this. Ours contains macros, which you want to enable macros for this particular one. You don't want to enable macros innately into Excel or anything like that. Be careful when macros are introduced to anything outside of the university, mainly because macros can be dangerous. Viruses can be introduced through macros. So if somebody's sending you something that you don't know who they are or anything like that, or they're outside of the university and it has macros, don't do it. Mainly because, you know, macros are they automate content, and so you don't want that if it's, you know, if it's a virus or anything like that. So for this particular one, you'd enable that content. Mainly because macros do great at like telling us things in this particular IBW. And so first off, I'm going to kind of go over a few things, and I'll kind of do a little bit of filling out. It'll be pretty automated filling out because I have already stuff that I've set up to copy and paste into here, so we can kind of make it very quick. Here is our graduate student insurance, full year, fall, spring, summer, or summer only, and you would enter that into here. Fringe benefit type. This would be, you know, whichever code falls within here, you'd put that in here. If they are a retiree, then you wouldn't put their fringe benefit type in here, it'd just only go into the retiree area. Here's the PI info, department, or I guess lead PI info, department, project title, funding agency. We're just going to go ahead and fill that out. If it'll let me. There we go. Okay, so first off, this gives you special instructions. The minute you start filling it out, it says, you know, first time you've used the all-in-one internal budget worksheet, please click the message tab to read and print special instructions using this worksheet. So we have this message tab, and it has all the special instructions, has the user guide, everything else like that it links to. All enabled by macros. So duration of the project in months. So for us, we'll do a 5-year project. But the start date is 5/1/24. I'm going to show you all something really cool. So this is the first period. So your first period can only equal a year. No matter whether you're dealing with NIH or anyone else, they like the first period to be no bigger than a year. But the nice thing about these macros, say if I did 4/30/2024. So this thing kind of gets a little sassy on you. It's we've heard of short projects before, but this one really takes the cake. So it's kind of, you know, you gotta it kind of catches you in certain places. So, and if I did too long of a period, it would do something as well. So we'll go ahead and put the correct thing. We have for on-campus or off-campus submissions. So if your area that you're working, your office, you guys pay rent, and that is considered off-campus. For on-campus, you know, where your area is provided by the university, then you do that. Research activity, non-research activity, DoD, or if it's a rate other than our negotiated rates, you put that here. So you can put X, or X, or you'd put the you know, the non, so you can put like 0 here, and it would do 0%. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and just X here. Since this is NIH, they do follow a DHHS salary cap, and it is federally funded. So we kind of check those boxes off. Our fringe, our salary and benefits are calculated based off of these fringe types that you put in. The fringe benefits amount will automatically populate based on what you put in. So we're actually I'm gonna kind of add in some information here for you all. So it actually then says, okay, max salary base, because we have a salary cap, because we do follow that salary cap, is 212,100, because that is the federally mandated salary cap. And I'm going to go ahead and put their effort in here. And we will populate some fringe benefits. So you can already see that this is how much the university would cover because these two individuals get paid above the salary cap. That amount has to be covered. You can see that graduate student insurance, this is a graduate student, so you'd pull that from up here. This is actually, I'm pulling from my thing and it didn't pull correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and 694. And it has for each year. And going forward, it actually integrates that amount into these amounts down here. So it has year 2, 3, 4, 5 just for salaries. You can always, if somebody's salary changes on year 2, you can change their level of effort, or I mean, if their level of effort is supposed to change year 2, year 3. So these actually base themselves off the previous year, and they also have that 3% or the increase. It's actually for us, I think it's 2.17% for the increase, and that's based on the past 8 years of increases. And that's a memo that's actually put out by financial services over on this side that's based off of. So if I were to change this to 0, say John Deere put in 0 right here, then the subsequent year would say, oh, okay, he's probably going to put in 0 this year, but you say he comes back on, so you can just do 0.95 again. So he can not, he can sit out a year if he wanted to, or if that was the plan. We will go to UH employees. So UH employees kind of follows a little bit different rules. So we'll go ahead and add some quick information in here. And I think yep, it brought me down here. So and the fringe benefit type, just say she's faculty for now. And this kind of pulls into future years as well. So unless the level of effort changes, pulls into the future years and kind of extrapolates their salary as well. Pull into subcontracts. I'm going to pull some info here. And we also, while I'm pulling the info, we're actually working on an IBW ABS hybrid that will have everything all in one. For us, it's been kind of one of those things that since it's kind of all in one and we're trying not to do a separate ABS page or separate ABS, it's been kind of we've been running into some issues. So which kind of makes it difficult. So we're ironing some things out for those of you that are on HSC side and have seen it. There are some issues, and we are just about perfect on it, and we'll probably re-roll it out shortly. So yeah. So as you can see these areas in which it has these parentheses here. This is the amount that cannot be charged F&A on, and it actually rolls up into our budget summary page when we get there. But you can't charge F&A on that amount because of the 25,000, which was covered before. And thank you, Monica, for kind of covering that and covering like minimum salaries and stuff like that. It kind of saved me a little bit of time. So that was great. if you're doing year 2, 3, 4, 5, you can do, if you're like, oh, I need to do IBW for year 2 because it's just makes it easier for my calculations. You can put previous years subaward amounts. So say if I did 30,000 for year 1, or say this was year 1 and it's, we're in year 2 now. So now this whole amount up here, because that corresponds with A, this whole amount was not able to charge F&A year 2 because we paid them over 30 grand on year 1. And so that F&A on that 30 grand was actually taken out of here, or on the 25 of the 30. So if I were to take that out, see, it goes right back down to 60 rather than being the full 85 that you can't charge on. So we'll go into the budget summary page. I'm going to go ahead and populate a few things here. I'm going to kind of show you how it kind of extrapolates a few things. So I might just manually put in a few things. So we'll say 3,000 for consultants, something like that. This also extrapolates based on a 3% increase, which you can remove if it's only year 1, or we're only planning on paying 3,000 per year. Equipment greater than $5,000, you could do 5,001. It's going to say, okay, you might be buying equipment in subsequent years. You can always just zero that out, and it zeroes out subsequent years unless you're planning on buying any equipment. Then you just kind of put that in as well. This system is designed to be fairly smart, and it's it's all based on the macros and based on equations that we've kind of developed in here. So you can see that it kind of does the same thing for everything else. If you had contractual. So let's go ahead and scroll down, because all this is going to look the same. There are F&A modifiers. So anything that can't be charged F&A on, you'll see F&A modifier next to it. So, you think that you get like that straight look of 52.5, or if it was $100,000, you get 52,500 in F&A. That's not necessarily the case, because if you had an F&A modifier, and that's a lot of your money, or any amount of your money, then that kind of says, okay, F&A can't be charged on this amount. And so, let's do 2,000 here. So what this does is it says subtotal other expenses, subtotal direct expenses, and it says subtotal our direct costs. And then our subaward F&A costs. And then our total direct costs. And then our modified total direct costs. So this is what actually F&A is charged on, because we had subawards that equaled a lot of money, and I had a few things that were modifiers up here. Our F&A can only be charged on these amounts here. But that doesn't mean that it's not, that our total direct costs are right here. This is just the amount that these can be charged on. Looking at that, then you'd add, the F&A in. And this is where you get your totals. You can also see your salary allocation and a personnel summary. So who is where and what. But let's go ahead and take a look at that budget summary again. I'm actually going to go into salary detail first and just make an adjustment. So if we're going to zero this out, or actually give us like, let's say we're applying to HRSA, with a lot of their 8% going on here. And we'll just kind of 8% that. So let's go back to our budget summary. This automatically goes down to 8%. And then we have our 8% charged on those years. And so it drastically changes everything. Were there any questions? This is a lot to take in. If you all do have questions in the future, no matter what campus you're in, I'm happy to answer any questions, or go over it with you, or else, if there's something that you would like to see or think that we're missing or think that, would be great to add in here, be sure to let me know. We like to make this as user-friendly as possible. This makes it where we build a better product for you, the university, and that you all are what matters. So
There actually,
Sean,
oh,
go ahead.
I was just gonna point out the question in the chat.
okay.
So Michaela is saying, they've been experiencing long and somewhat unpredictable delays in project start times due to delays in indices and funds being assigned. When staff work on projects is delayed for multiple months, do they need to submit modified IBWs to reflect changes in effort or timing, or is the initial IBW with the proposed effort and timing sufficient?
Okay, so that also depends on, are you starting on the project when it's supposed to be started on? If that effort is going to be put in, and you say if you do an RTSF, a request to spend funds, or you're pulling funds from a different, index, and then you're going to JV it over, your initial IBW should be correct. Your initial IBW should suffice because you are, still within that time, and I think, even the awarding grantor is expecting you to do that work then. So I do believe that, yeah, if you're paying for things already and everything else, and you haven't gotten awarded yet, then your award is good from the start. If you're pulling either from a different index or doing a request to spend funds where your department fronts the money essentially, then you should be fine with your initial one.
Michaela's saying they can't typically start until an index is assigned. So it sounds like there is an actual delay in the start date.
And so when you do a request to spend funds, especially on our side, I'm not sure how it's done on main campus. When you do a request to spend funds, an index is created. And so you would go into our record and click, and an index would be created and an index would be assigned. Typically that's how you would kind of, especially with the delay in award times, or if it's awaiting a COI or something like that, that's how you would actually get to where you would be able to start work and start doing things on our end. Glad I could help.
Well, and just for main campus, basically it's similar. You would submit your request to spend funds form to OSP. Keep in mind that the project has to be a grant. It cannot be a contract. And so as long as you're expecting a grant to be awarded and you have some documentation from the sponsor indicating that they do plan to award you, you can submit the request to spend funds form to OSP, and they would have an index created for you as well, so you could start spending. And there's a limit. I have to check, but I believe it's like 30 days in advance is the kind of the farthest you can go with a request to spend funds form. I think that's right. I have to double check it. I haven't submitted one in a while.
Awesome. Are there any other questions for either one of us, I guess?
So Sean, if somebody on HSC side needs help with the budget or help with the worksheet, should they reach out to you or to SPO directly, or how can they get assistance?
Either would be fine. If it is a IBW issue, then you'd reach out to me. If there are questions, all of our people are trained on how to use the IBW and how to use our system, and so everybody should be able to help you. If not, then they'll direct you to me. So I'm I'm kind of the catch at the end. So yeah, definitely yeah, go to your specialist, go to me, either one works. Let's see, there's a question from Michelle. Is there a grant, trial, or study workflow map for HSC? As far as I guess I would need a little bit more context. Like as far as getting awarded, as far as like the life of one, life cycle, or and feel free to unmute yourself if it's a lot of information.
It actually is.
I figured it would be.
What I'm trying to do is I've been trying to create a map because we have trials, studies, and grants in my department. So we've been trying to clarify when we submit it into Click, who touches it and what happens there. And then it goes to to restricted accounting, who and what happens there. Because then we also have HSCAR where we have to bill for like some of our trials and some of our studies. And there's a breakdown as to who and how I get those and if I can get statements. So who touches that and how do I get a hold of them?
Okay, that is a great question. And we'll see if we were told we have like 3 minutes, so I will be very quick. We have on our website, if you go to our staff directory, I'm going to share our screen really quick because it's probably the best way to do it. If you go to the assignment chart, so it should take you into a smart sheet, and it tells you everything. So if you go to our website, go to about, go to staff directory, and then click on that smart sheet that I just showed you. It'll show you who's assigned to you, who does your clinical trials, and who is your post-award person. If Smartsheet will load faster, which I have a feeling that it's going to take a lot longer than it should. Oh, here we go. So, okay. So overall, your clinical trials person for everyone is Caitlin Vineyard. Your ancillary agreements, so unfunded, Siri. Subawards outgoing, Madison Dow. Dean Von Fox, again, subawards for Cancer Center or CDAs. And then these are your post-award people, contracts and grant accounting. And then these are your pre-award people. So if you fall in this gray area, equivalent to your department, you would go here. And if you fall in this, so blue area, you'd go here. So contracts would be Julie Gallegos for these blue areas. Grants would be Jessica. And then these are your contract and grant accounting people. So I'm going to stop my share. Let's see.
Sean, there was a question about one-on-one training. I answered for main campus, but you might want to respond to that for HSC.
Yes, you can email me. We have one-on-one trainings for things. We also have trainings that are offered monthly for all areas that we cover, whether it be how to use the IBW, how to use our websites, how to use our grants.gov, assist, anything like that. I do all those trainings. I think that's it. If nobody else has any other questions, I think we just stayed under.
Oh, there's one more question for you that just came in under the wire.
Do we need to create a click record at the time a faculty member submits a letter of intent to the sponsor? I would. It's not necessarily required, but it because they sometimes will want to do an unfunded just to kind of keep track of it. But I would just say submit a full-on record. Just because, if it does come back, then you're ready. But yeah, we usually try to keep track of things with the record. So if you didn't want to do an actual funded record, then you would do an unfunded to kind of keep track of this letter of intent. It also depends on your sponsor's project specialist. I would contact them and see if they would require one of you. Each one is slightly different. And so, if they're okay with it, then I would contact them first. And I think we're out of time in 2 seconds. So thanks everyone.